Folks, peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. Let's first discuss the undercount of the 2020 census. How blacks, Native Americans, Latinos, we've all been undercounted. How did something like this happen? Plus, let's talk about the sentencing of Jussie Smollett. Not necessarily the verdict or the sentencing, but what about the judge and what he had to say? Do you think that the judge went too far in this judgment? Later, we'll talk about the billion-dollar cost of police misconduct. Wait till I tell you, folks, how much it has cost this country to deal with bad cops. You will be blown away. And then later, Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. We'll discuss what the implications of this bill may be. And this is a bill that's gotten all of Florida talking. And a lot of parents and young people wondering what's next. We'll have that and a whole lot more. Stay with us. It's the culture right here on the Black Star Network. Well, let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. A lot to get to today, so let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about this report that came out yesterday from the Census Bureau said that they have actually undercounted Latinos, Native Americans, and Black people. Yes, folks, the 2020 census has admitted to the fact that they have done a significant undercount of these demographics. Yet they say that there are a total of 323 million people in the country still is accurate. How does that happen? In a few moments, we're going to talk to a former Census Bureau staff member to give us some insight about how this could possibly happen, given all the things that we know and all the things that can be done about the census. But let me just break this thing down for you very, very quickly, because this report has come out and has gotten everybody wondering, well, how did this go on? Well, you remember in 2020, of course, the big news of the year was COVID-19. And so the Census Bureau has put out a statement through its director, Mr. Robert Santos, that said that this has been a very, very challenging year. Let me just share with you what Mr. Santos said in his statement about this undercount. He said, quote, "This is notable given the unprecedented challenges of 2020, but the results also include some limitations. The 2020 census undercounted many of the same population groups we have historically undercounted, and it overcounted others." Wow. So historically undercounted, but overcounting others. Well, who are the overcounted? According to the Census Bureau, the census overcounted white and Asian American residents. Now, according to the report, it says that minority groups mostly concentrated in cities and tribal areas were underrepresented in census figures, even though the total population count in those areas often was fairly accurate. That could affect those groups' political clout and conceivably could sway decisions by businesses and governments over the next decade, from the allocation of city services to location of stores. The whole purpose of the census, folks, is that the government, businesses can use that data to make decisions on how to from everything from gerrymandering to everything to how money is allocated to various areas. All of that is determined by that data. Now, with this undercount, it looks like Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans are once again will be left behind the eight ball, will be far behind in getting the necessary allocation of resources or getting any type of resources for their communities. I want to check in now We got our culture crew member, Bakari Jones, who's joining us as she does every Friday. Bakari is an activist within the LGBTQIA community and a strategist. And then in a few moments, we'll bring on Mr. Kim Chase, who is a former Census Bureau worker. But let's bring Bakari in at this point. Bakari, good to see you, sis. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, Farajii. Happy Friday. Thank you for having me again, bro.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bakari.
Let's talk about it, Farajii.
2020 census. Now, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I remember before even having, when I was doing my radio show during the time that in the 2020 census, I was telling people all the time, fill out the census form, fill out the census form. You know, it was a big push by my station at that time to get people to fill out the census form. So I personally filled out. I went online and did it. It took me like 5 minutes to do it, and then I'm telling other people, it's all it's about is a count. It's a count so we can start getting some money, so we can start making some better decisions. It will strengthen us in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
You see this massive push, especially from, influencers, Black leaders, and all of those folks who are telling people get out there. And then you get to this point where the Bureau itself says, we undercounted you guys. So sorry. So sorry. What do we make of that?
To be honest, Farajii, I have a lot of thoughts on this. One, just the title of the New York Times article. For me, it's like even just the title, it makes you wonder: is there a little bit of what like the red herring, right? Because it's the headline is about undercounting Hispanic, Black, and Native American residents of the United States. There's not even in not even underneath in that byline do we talk about the fact that there was another two other groups that were overcounted, right? So in general, before we even get into the actual numbers, my thought is, well, why not just say that there are errors, that no one was accurately counted, right? Why do we point out the groups specifically that are undercounted? Because I think it's just as dangerous that one or several groups were undercounted and several groups were overcounted. So that's just kind of my first response when reading and just kind of learning more about that information. Now, I will also say, anybody that's worked in and around data, and just any testing, measuring, monitoring, there's always a margin of error. There's always some margin of error. So I think just understanding, okay, we come into this knowing, yes, there's going to be some margin of error. Okay, no one's perfect. We're not robots. We've talked a little bit about AI before. We don't necessarily even want to get into that space, right? But what margin of error is reasonable and what margin of error is unreasonable? And to be honest, Farajii, I think when it comes to undercounting any group during the COVID pandemic, I think that I would be more inclined to understand that. I just have to be honest. I am more alarmed and curious and want to know more about how do you overcount any particular groups in a pandemic. That is just kind of where my mind goes. So I know we're talking about the groups that were undercounted, but I cannot, that's one of the questions that I want to ask when you bring a guest on today. How do you overcount groups in this instance? That's just kind of, because it boils down to representation, right? As you just said, right? That's why there's such a big push, because based on, what these numbers say, they impact so many different things within our country, right? That you said, all this data, the way that's used by our government, by businesses to, reappropriate seats to the House of Representatives, so on and so forth. My first thought is, how do you overcount groups? I want to know how that group gets counted, more highly. So that's just where my thoughts are, Farajii.
Well, let's ask that question and a few others as we bring in our guest, Mr. Kim Chase, who is a former Census Bureau staff member. Mr. Kim, thank you so much, dear brother, for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Farajii. Good afternoon. And the young lady, I didn't get your name again. Tell me, is it
Bakari?
Bakari. I'm sorry about that. And good afternoon to both of you. Hope you're enjoying the beautiful day.
Oh, absolutely, Brother Kim. Absolutely. So, Brother Kim, talk to us about this. I don't know what to call this. Is this, the Census Bureau director himself, Mr. Santos, said, hey, we messed up. But then how do you undercount one group or a number of groups, overcount another group, and then still reach an accurate total for the country of, and right now the way it stands, it looks like we're at about 323.2 million people in this country. How does that happen?
Well, first of all, I want to say that when you deal with census data, everything is based on address. So what you have to do is that when you go from address to address, people have to be home. I want to say this first of all, that people have to respond. You can say it all day or till you turn blue in the face, that to tell people to, because I know you did, because we were working with the same radio station,
Right.
and I heard you over and over said, "Hey, go out and do this. Go out and do this." I would tell people myself, "Go out and do it. Make sure you answer that. Make sure you answer that." But sometimes people, you may knock on a door. First of all, let me back up here. Because I was sworn with an oath of office to the Census Bureau. In this conversation, I cannot say anything about any personal identifiable information, things that I saw and so forth and so on,
Facts.
because it they guarantee a vacation in a federal prison or $250,000 fine or both. Anyway, so I think when you have addresses and people are coming through trying to get you to answer. Some people don't want to answer you regardless of what you say, because sometimes there's a feeling that that the government may do what they want, what they're going to do anyway. But like you said earlier, it affects allocation of resources. So in those allocation of resources, there are schools that get money. There are hospitals that get money. There's some years ago, I know a friend of mine who worked for Baltimore City Fire Department, and there's some grants and so forth. Some of the data helps to hire fire department employees. He was on a truck, and there's the police. And all that goes into that. But sometimes when people don't answer, like what happened in 2010 in New York when they lost representation, because it really was a small margin, but that small margin helped them to lose representation because of the census, because of that. And I will say this, that a lot of times people don't, people will they're still kind of apprehensive, but there's also points when somebody may have, let's say for instance, they may have moved or something, and somebody else still thinks that they live there. That may not necessarily be the case, because sometimes there are people who can proxy account. In other words, like if somebody is unavailable, like could be a family member, and they're still trying to count them per that address. Remember, I said everything is based on address. Nothing is good. It's not based on a person. When you get to the address is when you count the number of people in that that's when the data comes out about the with the demographics. That's when that comes out. Now, first of all, as far as the decennial goes, which this was.
And decennial, just to let everybody know, Brother Kim, you're saying decennial because that is the every 10-year census count that we are associated with.
Correct. Okay. Correct. You can, and that data, the personal identifiable information that is included in that data, will be released 72 years from now.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and that's the way it's been happening for a couple hundred years. So wow. This year is the year that, let's see, the 1950 census data, just from the decennial in 1950, it should be just released this year because it's 72 years post.
Wow. So I want to go back to something that you said. You said that the census is based on houses. That it's really it's address rather. So if you go to a home, you got a census worker that knocks on the door, and they were doing it. I remember they coming in 2020 with the mask on, and they knock on your door and they find that, and and what happens? That they ask you how many people live in your home, or what? What should be the conversation?
You should, first of all, you have to. It may seem kind of silly, but you have to verify with the person that you're at the right address.
Okay.
Because if you ever been in Baltimore County, when they have some houses that it's on one street, but then you go to the intersection where streets come together, and there's a house that's at an angle. Sometimes the address is on the adjacent street. So you have to. I mean, it just happens. Where I live, there's only one street name, but there are houses that sit. Sometimes some of the houses that sit behind other houses by 100 yards. Is that you would think that, okay, that's another street? No, that's the same street name. So you have to verify where you are, first of all, and then you have to go through the steps of asking the questions that's included in the survey form. In these cases, it wasn't on paper. It was done through a computer that's secure through RSA tokens, and they can transfer the information to headquarters.
So, but one of the things I do know about this, and this is something based upon your conversation with me offline, that you can go to a house and a person can say, yeah, this number of people live there, but they could be lying.
Yes. We don't know when somebody's really lying. In fact, I will tell you this. And like I said, nothing about this is just an example. If somebody is from a country and they consider themselves to be of a certain race, if they say they're of that race, you got to write it down.
So, okay. So there it is. So now you're dealing with, if a black person, a dark skin, let me just say that, a dark skinned person says, for example, hey, I'm from Europe.
No, they say they're Caucasian or white.
Or they're Caucasian. What? Then you have to write it down as them saying they're Caucasian.
Right, because the statistics are based on truth. And if somebody lies to you, do you really know that they're lying?
I mean, but if you're looking, you know what I mean? Like if you're looking at the person and saying, well,
I know, I'm looking at you right now.
Right.
You don't look like you're from China.
Right.
But or so
for example, like
somebody mixed race.
So like with Bakari's point, a Chinese person can really affiliate themselves as being like a white person, right? They could say, well, no, I mean I'm Chinese, I'm Japanese, but you could put me down as white.
That in that case, we're saying the difference between Asian or Caucasian or white. So it's wow. Asian, and then there's an Asian breakdown too. I'm trying to remember all of them by memory of and this is not any personal data or anything, but in terms of Asian, there's also Pacific Islander,
right?
Which Hawaiian, Samoan. That's so if you ask a race, you have to be, you have to accept what they're saying. I mean, I can look at somebody and let's say Bakari, and then she says I'm white. I'm like, really?
Or she might say she's Latino.
Well, that's not considered a race.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you talk about the Hispanic community, you're talking about, basically color.
Gotcha.
Whether they're Caucasian or whether they're African descent, and there's a lot of Latino people that are of African descent.
Right. So here's one of the things that it was reported, Brother Kim, that it says, quote, this is from the New York Times, although the Bureau did not say how many people it missed entirely, they were mostly people of color, disproportionately young ones. The census miscounting 4.99 of every 100 Hispanics, 5.64 of every 100 Native Americans, and 3.3 of every 100 of African Americans.
So I would say that also, remember we had a conversation offline that what are you comparing the data to?
Right.
And there's another survey called the American Community Survey, and that picks up demographics as well. In fact, I never did any survey that did not pick up demographics. The only one that really people focus on is the demographics from the decennial. But all of them pick up the demographics. So there can be, and from what I understand from some people who are on how can I say this, a higher pay grade than me, they would, you can compare some data, and you also have to go out and verify. There's a bit of verification too, because when I worked in the 2010 decennial, there was something called a non-response follow-up. So they would send somebody out for the people who would not or did not answer or could not answer or unwilling to self-respond. There's some people who are just unwilling to, because there's I don't know, you might call it conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. No, I know people have a resistance to participate, because I feel like Bakari and Brother Kim, that they just don't know like the whole purpose of the census, right? So they're not going to participate, as if, and this is the other thing to push back. People act like, oh no, I don't want them to know I'm here. And it's like, if you got a social security number, bro, you already here.
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the thing that a lot of people will miss. They don't pay attention or don't believe that there really is a Title 13. Title 13 United States Code says if there is a census worker, and we're talking about especially somebody sworn to an oath of office, the same one that the vice president of the U.S. takes, with a little other stuff added in there too about just giving up information you shouldn't be giving up.
Yeah.
And they miss that. They say, you'll get away with it. No, that's the one thing that they're very, very serious about. So you can't, if somebody lives at a particular address, you cannot just you can't give their information to somebody, as we want to say, willy-nilly. You can't do that. Somebody who does that, a census worker, if a census worker was to do that, they're going away for a while.
Absolutely. Brother Kim, I gotta stop you right there. I'm blown away that now that you get into the weeds of it, Bakari, I'm blown away that we are at this point, and it's like almost to the point where it's like, I guess we gotta wait till 2030.
Well, I want to ask Brother Chase. So you said this is based on an address. So I can understand going to an address and no one responding because, to your point, conspiracy theories, and I think it's probably a little bit fair to say, because specifically when I think about the Hispanic community, the intimidation from ICE, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I can understand some of the reasons why folks would not respond. But how do I go to an address 2 times or 3 times to overcount other people? Can you speak a little bit about how we get to the flip side of that coin where we're counting people more?
You got 30 seconds, Brother Kim.
I don't believe and based on everybody that I work with, no, that you don't go to an address. Once you've been there, you're done, period. You're gone. In terms of the Latino community or somebody else, and they're thinking ICE may show up, it is illegal. It is grossly illegal for a census. Remember I talked about Title 13, that includes that includes police, that includes anybody else that tries to. The president of the United States can't delve into that information.
Gotcha.
Period.
We got to stop it right here, Brother Kim. I appreciate you for giving us some insight into this situation. My hope is, and I know a lot of advocacy groups are pushing for this data to be reviewed. They're looking at, how this is going to be pretty much another strike against Black, Brown, and other, marginalized communities. We got to figure it out. There has to be something to be figured out.
Farajii, real quick, I will say that I think that people should do their own deep dive into the census website, census.gov. I would say do your own deep dive into that, and put the search window up there, look at the information written about proxying, look at the information that's there right in front of you. So I would say that don't just listen to what you see, hear it in the newspaper, hear it on the news, do your deep dive.
There it is. Kim Chase, former Census Bureau worker. Thank you so much, Brother Kim, for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about the sentencing of Jussie Smollett. Not really talking about what his sentence was, but talk about the judge's response. And we'll see if he was out of line or was he doing his due diligence. We'll have that conversation with Ashley Banks and Bakari Jones. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
folks, former Empire actor Jussie Smollett was sentenced yesterday to 30 months of felony probation, including 150 days in jail in the Cook County Jail. And that's the day is the first day that he is serving in Cook County. And he's been also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of more than $120,000 and a $25,000 fine for making false reports to police that he was the victim of a hate crime back in January of 2019. Now, after this judge announced the sentence, Jussie Smollett still maintained that he was innocent. He said, quote, "Your Honor, I respect you and I respect the jury, but I did not do this." Then he's turned to the court and he said this, "And I am not suicidal. And if anything happens to me when I go in there, I did not do it to myself, and you must all know that." We want to bring in our contributor, Ashley Banks, to be a part of this conversation, along with Culture crew member Bakari Jones. But Ashley, thank you again for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you today, Farajii?
I'm all right. I'm all right. So that was just the basis of the case, right? Like this sentencing, he's gotten 150 days that he's going to have to do. Now, once that sentence was announced, I want to play this clip of what the judge had to say, and then let's take it from there. This is the judge speaking to Jussie Smollett in the courtroom yesterday.
I know that Jussie Smollett grew up knowing to be sensitive to matters about racial discrimination, any kind of discrimination, any kind of social injustice. And as a matter of fact, I'm learning more about it as we're going on in the letters I've been receiving and the testimony I've heard today. He's been doing this all his life. He doesn't just talk the talk, he's walking the walk. He's out there, he's advocating. He's involved in the community. He cares deeply about social justice issues. And for you now to sit here, convicted of hoaxing hate crimes, racial hate crimes, and homophobic hate crimes, the hypocrisy is just astounding. I don't know where to begin. I'll remember one thing that will always stick in my mind, and I've been involved in so many trials over the years, but something happened in this trial that it was remarkable, and it talks about your sensitivity to issues of social justice. You're on the witness stand. You're being cross-examined. Your liberty is at stake. It is your criminal trial. Mr. Webb is winding through some things on cross-examination, and he's going through some social media communications, and whether it was Instagram or chat or text, a little quibbling about that doesn't matter. But Mr. Webb found a line that he wanted to confront you with, and he said, "Didn't you say," and he used a word starting with the letter N, "meet me at this place at this time," and I'm paraphrasing. And rather than just answer the question, which is what a witness is supposed to do and expected to do in their criminal trial, you stopped the proceedings. You said, "Mr. Webb, out of respect for all the African American people in this courtroom, you should not be using that word." And I was amazed. But it showed, and I'm not talking about the parrying and the gamesmanship that may go on between a prosecutor and a witness on the stand. That's not why I'm telling this, recalling this event. But what I'm talking about is how sensitive you were to any kind of slight, that anybody, if the wrong words come out of somebody else's mouth, you're going to get up and speak up and complain about it. And make sure that they know that they're not behaving the way you're supposed to behave. So you know better than anybody else that these are serious matters. They're serious to you. They're clearly serious to you and as your whole family. And for you to be here now, convicted of these hate crimes, it's just astonishing. Faking hate crimes. So why did this happen? That's a good question. I think that's the question on everybody's mind. There's some conjecture you did it for the money. Frankly, I do not believe that you did it for the money. You were making, the evidence showed, close to $2 million a year when this happened. I don't think money motivated you at all. But the only thing I can find is that you really craved the attention, and you wanted to get the attention, and you were so invested in issues of social justice, and you knew that this was a sore spot for everybody in this country. You knew this was a country that was slowly trying to heal past injustices and current injustices and trying to make a better future for each other. And it was a hard road. and you took some scabs off some healing wounds and you ripped them apart for one reason. You wanted to make yourself more famous, and for a while it worked. Everybody was talking about you. The lights are on you. You were actually throwing a national pity party for yourself. And why would you do such a thing? Why would you, I understand, you crave the attention so much, but why would you betray something like social justice issues, which you care so much about? And the only thing I can conclude is that, and I acknowledge, there are wonderful sides to you. There are very giving and charitable and loving sides to you, but you have another side of you that is profoundly arrogant and selfish and narcissistic. That's the only thing that can be concluded. And that bad side of you came out during the course of all these events.
That was Cook County Judge James Lynn, who spoke really for more than 30 minutes, Ashley and Bakari, to give his psychoanalysis of Jussie Smollett. Ashley, I'm gonna start with you with this. Was this judge out of line?
So Farajii, when I heard the judge's comments, because they do go on, and he goes on to say that Smollett went from riches to rags, that he's an embarrassment to his family, politicians and celebrities who have had his back throughout this whole entire thing. I just felt like it was completely out of line for a judge to say all of these things. First of all, Smollett has continued to maintain his innocence, or he says that he didn't do it. Whether you believe that or not, it is not up to a judge to sit around speculating who Smollett is. So to defame his character in the way that he was doing, and to call him all these things, narcissistic, selfish, arrogant, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. Smollett has been through enough. I mean, obviously, if he is guilty of what happened here, of creating this entire hoax, it's still his doing. And whatever happens from there happens from there. He's facing the consequences. He has been sentenced. But I don't think it's right for a judge to sit there and say the things that he said to Smollett. You're just rubbing it in even further, and it's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, 30 minutes from the judge's bench, Bakari, to kind of lecture a grown man about something that he's been convicted for he's been sentenced for. I mean, I don't know if this idea, and we've seen how judges are getting into this space. I think of the judge from the Kim Potter trial, who killed the former officer that killed the Dante Wright, and how she kind of went into this kind of like, well, we're just going to make sure that we're going to create a space of empathy, and all of this is that, you know, we're sorry that Dante lost. It's like, but she's suffering too. And it's like this social commentary that's coming from the bench. It takes away from what the judge's role really is, which is to interpret the law.
I agree. I think I agree with both you and Ashley. You know, and I was thinking the same thing. It's in my mind comparable to that was Judge Chu in the Kim Porter sentencing, in the killing of Dante Wright. For me, it was also just incredibly patriarchal, right? It's like your dad or your father figure giving you, a 30-minute lecture after you've already been found guilty. I think that was enough. That's what the jurors decided. For me, I think that not only is it insulting, though, I think it goes back to the idea and the notion that in the United States, white public opinion equals public policy. And so to have this white male judge with the same, in this instance, this a level of notoriety that he acknowledges that Smollett has, for him to take that same level of notoriety and that opportunity in the quote unquote spotlight, right? Because obviously people are watching, for him to use that same spotlight to share what is his white public opinion, and then ultimately to use that to shape other white opinions. We know that in this country, that has that's one of the only things that we've seen kind of have the impact on a trickle down, so to speak, is that trickle down ultimately ends up impacting and shaping public policy. So that's really what my issue is. And I think it's also just the incredible, I can't think of the words, not synchronicity, but the association between in the census story that we just did, right? The overcounting of both our white and Asian groups, and now in this instance, we have a white judge that is giving this patriarchal lecture, and in Judge Regina Chu's instance with Kim Porter, also given not quite as patriarchal from its male stance, but it was a sort of calming down. I think to your point, right? The reference to former President Obama when she made that comment about empathy. So what is that same, in my opinion, that same attempt to use white perspectives to shape how we want to govern Black bodies?
Right. And see, that's the big thing, Ashley, is that we're seeing that, if a judge decides to take on a stand, and I think Jussie Smollett was wrong. You know what I mean? I think he was wrong. I'm not one of these folks that is like, oh, that's another Black man going. I think he was wrong. He shouldn't have done it. I believe he did do it. But that doesn't take away from the fact of, I was always taught that you don't kick a man when he's down. You know what I mean? Like if you are in a fight with somebody, you knock somebody out, you don't go over there and kick them, because now you're crossing from a line of defending yourself to injustice. And so when just to go on this rant for 30 minutes, it's like, whoa, like, what do you want this man? Like, what do you want this man to do? And then to see the response from Jussie saying, hey, I'm not suicidal. It's like, obviously, this is playing on his mental health. This is playing on how he sees himself. So why do you keep, like even America as a country, we're like, okay, we're trying to get past this thing. And it doesn't seem like, I don't know, the judge just felt like we needed to really stop and listen to what he had to say.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, this case is from 2019. I remember reporting on it extensively as it was taking place. And many of us, although, like you've said, Farajii, I believe he's guilty as well. A lot of us think he's guilty, but we've moved on with our lives. And like you said, this judge here just sulking in it. And it's just like, okay, he's guilty. We get it. This sentencing was the longest hearing I feel like I've heard in my life. Just carry on, give this man his sentence and move on. But like Bakari and you were saying, Farajii, when it comes to the white judge and let's say the white person who is either guilty or not guilty, like in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, we saw the judge there was super friendly with Kyle, was almost like a father or a grandfather figure, and made sure that Kyle was comfortable. Although Kyle is someone who murdered 2 people and injured another person,
right,
and was found not guilty there, he was so comforted. When it comes to a Black subject like Jussie Smollett, he's not comforted. He's looked at as the enemy. Yes, what Jussie did was wrong, but at the end of the day, he's still a person. And maybe he's mentally ill. Maybe there are other things there that should be explored, as opposed to just, like you said, kicking him while he's down. But it just goes to the point how this country, how the legal system, how judges see Black people as opposed to white people. It's just like when it comes to committing crimes. When we see that a Black person has committed a crime, what's the media doing? What's the legal team doing? They're digging up the history of the Black person, the history of what they've done in the past that has no connection to the current case. But when it comes to the white person, like the kid who was a swimmer, who was accused of rape, it's no, who cares that he raped this person? Let's talk about how great of a swimmer he is. Let's talk about the future that he's going to have. He's going to be a law-abiding citizen. It doesn't matter. He made this little mistake. But when it's a Black person who's done something, they're just the worst thing in the world. Here in this case with Jussie, it is unfortunate that I do believe he's made it hard for people who are real victims of hate crimes. But at the end of the day, nobody was hurt. We saw in the case with the white woman in Central Park who called the cops on the bird watcher, and they said that he was hurting her, and he wasn't at all. And she didn't go to jail, right? She made a false report, just like Jussie, different jurisdictions, so the laws are different, but she still made a false report. She was charged, but the charges were dropped. And she's looked at this poor woman, right? This poor woman who made this false report, but she could have gotten that man killed.
No doubt.
We've seen this time and time again, but in the case of Jussie, he's just this Black man who did this horrible thing. He needs to spend 5 months in jail for lying. And it's just really unfortunate to see the disparities in the legal system.
I mean, the disparities are real, but I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with you, Ashley. None of the Karens that we have seen over these past couple of years have, I mean, they literally could have gotten those black men that they called the police on, they could have gotten them killed. I mean, they could have got, Jussie did this to himself. He set up a situation that affected him by himself. But those white women who called on the bird watcher, the dog walker, the young man that was sleeping, I mean, all of them could have been killed by police just in a simple second because of that perception. Let me share with what folks are saying on our YouTube page. Infamous Kiki said, it seemed like the judge took it personal. Damn. I'm like, really? Yeah, it does seem like he took it personal. Also, Zoe checked in and said, the hypocrisy. The judge is guilty of doing this exact thing he is scorning Jussie for. Showboating at its best. The judge was out of line. And then Renee checked in and said, you have never been lectured by an employer or parent as an adult or professor, and we should talk fair. I was born there. Stop letting other people speak in my place or for myself. That is embarrassing. And then a couple of people are saying, look, this is a part of the process. John James said, look, when you're guilty, you get talked to like you're guilty, Bakari. But I feel like there needs to be a boundary on that, right? Like if you're guilty, and I know Jussie has been saying it, even after the sentences were read, there was a moment where he kind of like lowered his head in his mask. He can still be heard saying, but I'm innocent. Okay. But my thing is, you may think you're innocent. The whole trial has already gone through to show that you are the one responsible for creating this hoax. But at the end of the day, you should still walk out of that courtroom with some dignity about who you are, right? I mean, if you've never stood in front of a judge, I don't care if you stood in front of a judge for a traffic violation. It is one of the most intimidating things that can ever happen to people, let alone black men. It's absolutely, I've done it. I've had to go to traffic court, and you think you're going to traffic court for something small, and then you wind up, you seeing people getting literally thrown in jail because they stood in front of a judge, and the judge went on a little lecture, and then next thing you know what? We need to put you in jail, sir, because this is crazy, and you're next up in front of the judge. It's one of the most, it's intimidating. This is Jussie right here. Can we get the sound on this very quickly, Keenan?
And if anything happens to me when I go in there, I did not do it to myself, and you must all know that. I respect you, Your Honor. I respect your decision. Jail time, I am not suicidal.
Okay. Mr. Uche, let me inquire, are there any post-sentencing motions you care to present right now?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, Ms. Widow.
The defense would wish to present a motion to reconsider sentence and file it in standard.
It is timely filed.
Thank you, Judge.
And let me say, I've obviously considered the sentence at great length, and it's timely filed, so it's preserved for purposes of appeal. Motion to reconsider sentence is respectfully denied.
Wow.
And is there another, one second, Randy. Anything else? Just a second. Is there going to be a notice of appeal filed?
Yes, Judge. We filed a notice of appeal. We're going to be emailing to the clerk right now, to the office.
You doing it in standard? And are you going to be handling the appeal?
Judge, as of now, yes.
Well, you have to commit to handling the appeal for the appellate court. Okay. All right. Notice of appeal may be filed. Charlotte, now I need the prosecutors to work with Charlotte, the probation officer, to work out probation specifications. So with the conditions I just explained, 150 days in the county jail, the restitution, the fines. Oh, and also statutory DNA and costs are ordered as well. That's
so in that moment, we're going to take a quick pause, but in that moment, Ashley, he was adamant. He's still innocent. He's not suicidal. He already put it out there that if anything happens to him, just know that he didn't cause it himself. What are we seeing here from Jussie Smollett at this point?
Yeah, when I heard that yesterday, to me, it was just very eerie because for those to be his last words in the courtroom, I'm just like, Jussie, what is going on? And as we know, we've had instances where Black and brown people go to jail, they end up dead, and they're ruled suicide. Like in the case of Sandra Bland, we still don't know what happened in that case. My hope, though, is that Jussie is going to be okay. He can get out of jail within 75 days, within, if he performs good behavior. So hopefully he does get released from prison sometime soon. But if that's in his head, like you were saying earlier, with the judge just berating him, it's weighing on his mental health. All he's thinking is maybe people in the jail are going to be against me. Maybe the system is against me. Maybe the guards will do something. Maybe somebody there will hurt me. But I also go back to my point about maybe he's dealing with mental illness, and that's something that needs to be explored, because there was really no context with him just blurting out that I am not suicidal. And he even left the courthouse with his fist up saying, I am not suicidal. And so I wish that had been explored, and not to just keep rehashing. But when it comes to white crimes, when white people commit crimes, when they shoot up a whole joint, when they kill a bunch of people, the first thing everyone says is they're mentally ill. They were in their right minds. But when it comes to Jussie, he was in his right mind. He knew what he was doing. He's a narcissist. He needs to spend time in jail for lying. So it's just very unfortunate what's happening here. But I really do hope he comes out of this alive, because if something happens to him, that's a whole nother story.
Whole nother story. Ashley Banks, thank you so much for joining us for this part of the conversation. We truly appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Farajii.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take another quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about the billion-dollar cost of police misconduct. We'll talk to former law enforcement officer Garland Nixon to get his take on why it costs so much and what can be done to relieve the burden from taxpayers' wallets. We'll have that conversation up next. Stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. A fantastic first hour. We talked about the undercount of the 2020 census, and then we also discussed the judge in the case of Jussie Smollett and how he gave this rant that took him way too far over. Folks, you got to check it out. Make sure you revisit. If you missed the first hour, make sure you go back to it because there's a lot of good things said and a lot of good ideas explored. But for the second hour, let's talk about the $1 billion cost of police misconduct. And you know what? When you have a conversation of this magnitude, and I'm going to keep driving it home, just keep driving it. You know, we talked about the number of Black people that have been shot and killed by police, and we talked about police brutality. But we have to drive this point home about what we're seeing coming from these police departments, and most importantly, the impact that their actions make, not just on our culture and society and our view of authority figures, the impact that their actions make on our pockets. So I'm going to have a guest by the name of Garland Nixon who's going to join us in a moment, but I want to bring Bakari back into this the conversation. Bakari, again, thank you so much for joining us. When we look at this $1 billion situation here, let me just share with you just a little bit of what has been found out. Now, again, this has been something we've talked about it on Fridays. The Washington Post has been keeping tabs on everything relating to police brutality, more so than the federal government. I can't emphasize this enough, Bakari. The media, the same media everybody blasts, and I get it. People say, "Oh, the media is destroying society and culture," but this media outlet is one of the few media outlets that's constantly putting out the data and the information to give us so we can have a better understanding. Not saying, "Hey, this is," not putting no spin on it, not adding no yeast to it, but just essentially saying, if you look at the facts and the figures based on the reports, based upon how the money is moving, this is a lot of money. Look, folks, I want to share with you very quickly. Take a look at this here, this statistic that more than 7,600 officers from Portland, Oregon to Milwaukee to Baltimore who alleged misconduct has more than once led to payouts to resolve lawsuits and claims of wrongdoing, according to a Washington Post investigation. The Post collected data on nearly 40,000 payments at 25 of the nation's largest police and sheriff's department within the past decade, documenting more than $3.2 billion spent to settle claims. Bakari, what's your take on this?
You said billion with a B.
With a B. Like your name, Bakari, with a B. $3.2 billion on police misconduct in this country. That's what we pay as taxpayers.
That's what we pay. My immediate thought is that, I hope that, again, the through line, I feel like one of the through lines I think today has been about data. My first thought is that when I see these numbers, when I see the data, when I see the stats, I hope that, organizations that are behind, defund the police, I hope that they're able to leverage this data to really kind of just illustrate more about what that goal there is. I think it frightens a lot of people to think about defunding the police, but we're really talking about redirecting these resources. When you look at Farajii, what's the number?
$3.2 billion.
$3.2 billion that could be redirected into our schools, our communities. It's astounding. And there are so many, we've talked about them on Fridays, the instances where people have been wrongfully arrested, tragically murdered. It's terrifying. And this is an interesting instance to say I love data, but I do love data. I love to be able to see the numbers, and when you see it, you just can't lie. So it's like, what is it that we are doing as citizens to be able to say we have enough data now, and we can start making different decisions based on the level of error. There's not, I think when we talk about malpractice in the health sector, there will be different, there would just be different checkpoints to prevent these same types of errors from happening again and again. This is just the number, Farajii, for me is astronomical, and to think about what those funds could do to better our communities. I think it's a perfect segue into being able to make that claim and redirect the attention, like I said, to defunding the police.
Yeah,
so that's my take.
3.2 billion. Let's talk to Garland Nixon, a former law enforcement officer. He's been in the business for over 20 years, and now he's doing his due diligence to make sure that people understand the dynamics of power when it comes to policing in this country. He's a retired police official. He did work with the ACLU, and so we're happy to have him joining us today. Garland, thank you so much, brother, for your time. How are you this afternoon?
Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Garland, when you think about the cost, you've been in law enforcement. You were on the ground. You were dealing with all of the dynamics, right? But then when you think about the cost, $3.2 billion is being spent on bad behavior from cops. I know that a lot of times this part of the conversation is not known, which is why we're raising it. But a lot of people tend to think it's just okay, we hear about certain instances. Sandra Bland, we hear about all of these different instances. Dante Wright, Freddie Gray, we hear about instances. But then when you look at the money behind it, you're like, oh my God, this is really a problem.
So the interesting thing is, okay, it's not known by us. It's not known by the majority of people. But who is it known by? Pretty much all major jurisdictions will have some kind of a board, some kind of a group that when the city has to pay money out or the municipality has to pay money out, it has to go through this board. The board has to review it, approve it, and then it has to be signed off by the mayor, right? So here's what I think about. Okay, the police department is doing what they're going to do. At some point, if you're the mayor, if you're on the city council, don't you have to say, well, in the last year, we looked at Baltimore, $41 million that could be used for the people of Baltimore, jobs programs. We could go on and on what it could be reallocated for. But if you're the mayor, you're continually signing off on this. You know what's going on. You're members of the city council. You see these numbers. You're on that board. You see these numbers. And nobody in that group stops and says, wait a minute, we've got a problem. There's the moral implications. Obviously, that's an entire show. But just as if you just address it from the perspective of financial, of economics, nobody in that crew stands up and says, time out. Perhaps it would be cheaper for us to do early warning systems that they have now and red flag systems for officers. The same officer over and over. There was an officer in Baltimore where they paid out $9 million for one officer, 14 incidents. And nobody says, perhaps it would be cheaper for us
to fire his ass.
Right. How about this? To come up with, now this is just one officer. It would be cheaper to pay for the department to have an intervention program, an early warning program. Heck, you could put in a whole staff of people and a whole new segment of the department for less than it cost to pay out the
Wait a minute.
Hold on. For one officer.
Brother God, let me. I gotta ask this question. This doesn't make no sense. I don't know, and this is why I think that we really do need to figure out what to do about policing in this country. There is no other institution that I can think of where a staff member, can be a $9 million liability and still keep their job.
Right. And this is what I get back to. And let me ask you this. Do you think if it was in the sewer department and some sewer worker kept, running over people's feet and they had to pay, that sewer person would still have their job? So there is an issue here that's bigger than just the individual cops. This is a culture in law enforcement. But what creates the culture? Certainly it's created by what's going on the ground. But isn't the culture also created by the people who run the city, who allow these kind of payments to keep going out, who keep signing off on these payments and never put up their stop sign and say, time out. Before we sign another one of these, we've got to make a serious change here. So I put a lot of blame in the city council members and the mayor's office, et cetera, who will sign off all this crap time and time again and never stop and say, we have to make some major changes. Aren't they as guilty? Because let me add this. The officers that work there, when they see their fellow officer get away with multi-million-dollar payments, hundreds of thousands of dollars of payments, and nothing happens, that they don't even lose their job, doesn't that build on the culture that you can do whatever you want and you're not going to be held accountable?
Facts. No, that's a big facts. So how does, and correct me if I'm wrong, how does the union play into this, Brother Garland? Because I know that the union serves as advocates for the officers. The union will take on, they will provide legal services when an officer is in trouble. So when $9 million or $3.2 billion or any amount of money is paid out, where does the union sit in all of that?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that. I'm going to give you an insider's view of an area that's major, that the union plays into it, that if you're not involved in that process, you wouldn't know. I've been involved in the process. One of the things that happens is this. So every 3-5 years, however often it is, the union has to negotiate a new contract with the city, Baltimore City, for instance, right? So what the union will come and say, okay, we want a 20% increase, whatever, right? They'll ask for some high number. And the city will say, well, we can't pay you that much. And the union will say, okay, in that case, and they already got a list, we want you to pass these new, agree on these new agreements within the agreement, the collective bargaining agreement. And what you'll find is things such as when an officer is accused of something and it's on tape, the officer is allowed to review the video before they make a statement. And let's be honest, if any of us commits a crime and you can look at the tape before you make a statement, you go to your lawyer and you just make up a story that matches the tape. So what happens is the negotiations for the collective bargaining agreement will negotiate all of these parts of the collective bargaining agreement that allow the officers to just get off and walk scot-free. They get things like, if you want to file a brutality complaint against an officer, there'll be things in there that says, well, you've got a certain amount of time you can do it, 60 days or 90 days. Well, wait a minute. If I commit a crime, there's not a 60 or 90 day statute of limitations. Why is it that an officer commits a crime against me and beats me over the head, I have to file that within 60 to 90 days? Those are the kinds of things that go in the collective bargaining agreement. And the citizens don't know that a collective bargaining agreement has been written by the union and agreed upon by the city, just so the city didn't have to pay them more money. They would negotiate with all of these things where even if the city wanted to hold them accountable, they can't hold them accountable because the collective bargaining agreement has let them walk scot-free every time.
That is incredible. Bakari, what's your question for Garland?
Man, that I'm sorry, Brother Garland. Thank you, just for shedding light on that process. Can you share a little bit about, I'm curious about the time frame specifically of some of the collective bargaining agreements. I imagine you may not know, each one, but did they typically, like once one is put in place, is it up for review? How often can they be, revised, edited, changed?
Well, oftentimes they're like 3 years, 5 years, or things like that. What I've advised that should happen, and this should be pressure put on these various city officials, there should be rules that say whenever the collective bargaining agreement comes up, that people, because a lot of times there will be laws that say that people can come in and review things and things like that, but there's no notification. So there should be rules in every city and every municipality that says whenever the collective bargaining agreement is coming up, 60 or 90 days prior, there should be notifications in the newspaper, and that people should be able to attend the sessions. And last but not least, once it's written, there should be either a review process or something where various advocacy organizations get a chance to look at it, to comment on it, to oppose it, because what they just do is you don't know what's going on, and they just slip it through. And if you got a chance to read it, you'd say, oh, you got to be kidding me. No, this is not going to happen. That's what we need: transparency and notification when these things are going on. Now, let me tell you, the stuff we're talking about now will really upset these unions because they don't want you to know what's going on. You could literally stop them from getting that stuff in these collective bargaining agreements instead of finding out that it's in there once the officer gets off and then having to say, how'd that get in there?
Absolutely. Right. And then my follow-up question, if I can, what's the role of the Civilian Review Board as it relates to the collective bargaining conversations? Is the Civilian Review Board coming in too late? Just can you shed some light on that particular body?
More often than not, they're not involved in any way in the collective bargaining agreement. Usually, it has been my experience, a civilian review board is a good idea, but the devil is in the details. So 10 different cities could have a civilian review board, but every one of them could have specifics written as to what they can and cannot do. And usually it's just an advisory role. They don't have a lot of power. And then you have things written into the collective bargaining agreement where certain things go into that an officer goes into their file and nobody can look at it. So, it depends on how the particular civilian review board is set up in a given jurisdiction. Oftentimes I find that the people don't really know a lot when they're setting it up, don't know what they need to do. They don't have a good advisor, and they're deliberately written up so that they're pretty weak. Yep.
So the civilian review board is pretty much a window dressing exercise to make us think that we have some say into the department and into the policies and into the, just into the governance of the department. But if the civilian I feel like if the civilian review board can't say yes or no, or can't speak with authority on cases of police misconduct, it's like, what is the point of the civilian review board? Right. If that's the case, then what do we as the community members need to do to get involved in this process? Because we know that, working with unions, and certainly you're not going to have a bunch of people trying to help the police from the Black community. That's just not happening. It's just not happening. So how do we make sure that, that they can really deal with all of this? Like that the community members, that the average citizen can say, you know what, I do have a say in how the police work with us. How does that happen?
The pressure really has to be on the city councils and the mayors. You really have to push them. They really have to feel as though if they don't act, that they could be, they could lose their job, or, they wouldn't get the support that they need. That's where it is, because they can do a lot more than they do. Oftentimes it'll have to be legislatively, but they get these police unions are very, very powerful, and they will pressure these people. And oftentimes they go in a back room. I mean, I've seen this wherein the advocacy groups will meet with legislators or meet with city council, whatever the case, and they'll talk. And then these same people will go in a back room. Because keep in mind something, a lot of times you're just the new person, you're the advocacy group, you're going in and talking to them. They've been working with the heads of the police unions and the police departments for years. They know them all by first name, and they'll come up with some kind of agreement, and they'll go in the back room, and the people in the police union and the leaders will tell them what they want, and they'll come out, and the legislators will literally pitch it to you. And I've seen this happen in Annapolis. They will pitch it to you as though they're unbiased, and really kind of they're working on behalf of the police unions. So it's very, very difficult. And I just say this, the accountability has to be at the legislative level, because you already know what the police department and the police union is going to do. That's a given, and ain't no point in arguing with them. You got to force the legislatures to hold them accountable and to give you what you want.
And I think, Bakari, that's one of the issues that's one of the big challenges. Of course, as activists, I remember back in 2015, I'll never forget this experience, that back in 2015, when Freddie Gray was killed inside of the police van in Baltimore City, literally, I never forget this. We went to myself and many other colleagues and the activist community. we went to the state legislature, and at the state legislature told us that the state legislature told us that we had to, testify on behalf and making sure we get, police on board. This was before Freddie Gray. We said to the state legislature, look, something is going to happen in Baltimore. Something is going to happen in Maryland. We need to strengthen the voice of the community. We need to really review what they call the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights to make sure that police don't get qualified immunity, or to make sure that police aren't protected when misconduct issues happen. They didn't want to hear us. They didn't want to hear us at all. And then that was in February and at the end of March. Next thing you know, in April, Freddie Gray was killed. And now everybody wanted to see, well, what is going to happen, or how do we deal with this issue? And it's like, the police department in this country, they get billions of dollars. I just read in LA, they get like $1.9 billion of the city council budget. It's like the power is that these institutions have. Look, I don't mind having good police. I think we need the police. But then it's like, you just want more and more money. And if the police was a regular business and we are the stockholders, then what is the return on the investment? We get more police, or we get more money for police department, only to get our asses whipped? Garland, talk to me, brother. I just don't understand.
Well, I remember I was at legislature, a lot too, where I was working with the ACLU. And I do remember one of the perfect example, one of the arguments that we had was in Maryland, in a brutality case, you have 1 year, maybe it's either 6 months or 1 year to file a brutality complaint. If not, you can't file it. And I said, so a police officer could hit me over the head with a club. I could go in a coma for 6 months. And if I woke up with 6 months and 1 day, I couldn't go after him for hitting me in the head with a club. That we had no anonymous complaints. Any complaint against an officer, you had to volunteer who you were, which, set you up for retaliation, right? And I said, wait a minute. I can go on every website in every police department in the state of Maryland, and right on the website it says anonymous complaints. Do you know somebody that's filed for selling drugs? Do you know somebody that's doing this? And I said, so if my next door neighbor's selling drugs, I can make an anonymous complaint against them. If the cop is selling drugs, I can't, because there is a statute of limitations. If the cop beats my next door neighbor half to death, if I wait until after 6 months and 1 day, I don't remember if it was 6 months or a year, I can't. So it's the unfairness. They argue that these LEOBORs, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, they argue that it's there to give officers rights. But what it really does, it gives police officers far more rights than we do. If I commit a crime, the statute of limitations, there may be none, or it may be 5 or 10 years, whatever. The cop, you got 6 months and a day oftentimes, or maybe 1 year to file a brutality complaint, or it goes away. The legislature's passed that, and we go in there and they won't get rid of it. So again, we have a system set up not to hold the police accountable. We have a system set up to allow officers. It's set up deliberately to allow the officers to walk. That's the system we're dealing with. So here's my question. Are we really stockholders? Or we're not stockholders. It's a system that's set up to hold us down and beat us down. We're not considered the stockholders. We're the ones that the system is, that the crosshairs are aimed at.
Absolutely. Garland, I'm wondering what's the next step for us for this conversation, because we're getting all of this data. We're seeing we're getting a better understanding of the complexity of this issue. What, as we, as John and Jane Q public, what do we need to do to become further empowered to get a control on this whole situation?
Well, we have to continue to advocate and we have to continue to support organizations. And I mean, grassroots organizations that can get people together, that can get voters together, that can get numbers together, that can make the demands to our legislature, because that's what it's got to be. The legislators got to see the grassroots organizations come together and the numbers of people in front of them that say, we've had enough and we want to change and we have a demand and here's what we demand. And I understand, there's terms, defund the police or whatever the terms are, but we got to have very specific demands. And I think that's what we have to do, support the grassroots organizations and make very specific demands to our legislators and say, we want this right here changed. Because as long as we say we want change in general, they'll say, sure, you can have change in general. And of course, there's nothing to ever get because it's too amorphous.
Absolutely. Garland Nixon, retired police official and former law enforcement officer. Garland, thank you so much, brother. We would love to bring you back on as we see this whole situation develop.
Thank you very much. Certainly.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about Florida again, how they have another piece of legislation that is being sent to Governor DeSantis' desk, essentially called what some would call the Don't Say Gay bill. We'll get some insight from Bakari and understand why we are at this place when it comes to parental rights in the school system and teaching our children about each other. Stay around for that conversation. Also, in the next 30 minutes, I'll have my last word as we wrap up on all of the things that have happened this week here on The Culture. So stick around. We got a lot more to get to here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the show, folks. On Tuesday, Florida lawmakers decided to pass a bill called the Parental Rights in Education Bill, HB 1557. What some critics call it the Don't Say Gay Bill, which is restricting speech in public school classrooms on sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is a bill that sparked a concern by a lawmaker who said that coming out as gay is now seen as trendy. Now, let me just share with you very quickly what the details, just the small details of this bill looks like. If we can throw that up on the screen, please, Keenan. It's very small. It's right there, like a little clause in the bill that says that prohibits classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in certain grade levels. Now, this bill comes at a vote of 22-17 after weeks of national attention. I mean, this bill has garnered the attention of everyone from the White House to Hollywood. And now people are wondering, what does that mean? Of course, advocacy groups within the LGBTQIA community are outraged. And now folks are trying to figure out if they can stop it, even though the bill is scheduled to be signed by Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida very soon. Wanted to bring our culture crew member, Bakari Jones, into this part of the conversation. Bakari, when you see a bill like this, and you work within the spaces of the LGBTQIA community, is there a concern that not that the sexual orientation is trendy, but that there's going to be an all-out attack legislatively against the LGBTQIA community?
That's certainly, I think that's a present fear, to be honest. I think especially because of the framing, right? So it's not just framed as you can't do this, it's framed as you can't, and again, I know the don't say gay, but it's essentially it's prohibiting these conversations. And also, just to your point, Farajii, you highlighted specifically in, I believe it's kindergarten through grade 3.
Yeah, 3rd grade. Right?
Where you can't have these particular conversations. But I think knowing that this bill is in response to the perspective, right? And I said earlier, the white public opinion equal in public policy, that's literally what we're seeing right here, right? If the belief is that it's trendy, so now this bill is in response to the belief that it's trendy, and now we're going to prohibit the conversations. And I think beyond that, for me, my concern, and I don't necessarily want to say fear, but my concern is that it seems, no one wants to think about having conversations about sex, period, when it comes to children. It's just something as a country, we have a very puritanical past. I don't know when we will be comfortable having those conversations. But that is the age, statistically, when children start to not necessarily question in the way, or want to be trendy in the way that Governor DeSantis is framing, but it's the age when children start to understand. They literally just start understanding their biology. You have this, I have that, you are, I am that, right? So that's when they start having those conversations. And it just means that in a lot of instances, there's not a conversation. The flip side to that, it's also, which I think is going to be interesting to see how things unfold in Florida, is I think Florida is also opening itself up for a lot of litigation to unfold at the slightest infraction of this bill.
Yeah, I mean, so part of me is trying to figure out, how do we have such a sensitive conversation, right? Being respectful of all the folks that are involved, all the stakeholders, members of the LGBTQIA community, of course, 3rd graders, kindergarten and 3rd grades. Like, part of me is like, okay, we're not even talking about sexual orientation or preference. Like, you just don't have conversations with a kindergarten about sex. I mean, that's just in general, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? And then once you get to 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, that that kind of stuff, I believe, should be something that parents should be involved in, that community should be involved. There has to be a very, I would say, intentional way to have these conversations, because I mean, yes, I my wife is a teacher, but everybody doesn't come into the classroom with a heart of gold, with the intention of trying to empower, with the intention of trying to help people to understand and to bridge gaps. And people, you still got some bad teachers out there, teachers that don't know how to really handle these type of sensitive conversations. So I guess my question would be is that do we need to have, special training for teachers to say, hey, this is how you have the conversation, bringing in individuals? Like, what needs to be done? Because I know what's going to come up. It's already happening in schools. A lot of exploration. A lot of students are coming out to say that they're a part of the community. So how do schools prepare for this in a very healthy, proper, and respectful way?
I think I've shared this before when we talked a little bit about mental health before. I think a lot of it boils down to having more resources, which is something something adds another layer. And again, like I said, I think it's going to be interesting to see how things continue to unfold in Florida for that reason. And I just want to say, for me, I think it's a sensitive subject, right? I do think that the parental rights for you to know what your children are being talked to about, I understand, and I support. I think that unless that same group is willing to say these are the resources that we're providing our young people as they explore, I think that's unfair. For me, I think it's unfair. And I think that where a lot of the LGBTQIA organizations are sort of alarmed is that, again, sort of back to us being in this sort of puritanical culture, we like to just pretend it doesn't exist as if that's going to prevent the exploration. And as if that, we've seen that same approach with when it comes to sex education, right? It's what was promoted is abstinence until marriage, and there are no resources that are provided for healthy sex education. And we understand the ramifications when we don't educate our young people. So it's a really slippery slope, and it's a really uncomfortable and awkward thing, I think, for just most Americans in general, especially Black Americans, when we couple that with spiritual and religious guilt and tension, all those things, right? Like layered, and just a level of ignorance. We don't know. I would sort of make the claim that, I don't necessarily know that it's trendy as much as we are seeing that folks feel more comfortable sharing that they're exploring. And, the last thing I'll say is that I think what I've read about a lot of young people when it comes to exploring and understanding gender identity and sexual orientation is that for a lot of young people, it is a phase, right? That's not all, but how do we create safe space to say you can have this conversation? If they can't have it with the teacher in the learning environment, or can they have it with the parent? I don't know. So to me, I think to your initial question, ultimately, I feel like it looks like a lot more resources being poured into these same schools and organizations. And that's what, I don't know all the nuances of the bill, but that's what I don't see present. And I think that's what causes a lot of alarm.
So I guess the other part about it, because the big element of this bill, Bakari, is that the classroom is pretty much, they're saying the classroom is not the place or the space to have these conversations about sexual orientation or gender identity. Mm-hmm. That's just not, it's just not happening. So, and parents can go, and parents can actually sue schools if they believe the schools violate this law once Governor DeSantis signs it. So right. There is that, I feel like this, it's setting up more attacks against the LGBTQ community by parents.
And not just the LGBTQ community, because, the fine print that I understand also talks about any critical decisions about a student's mental, emotional, physical health, or well-being. And there was another, I believe, senator who asked the question and said, so if your child decides that if your child reports that they want to be vegetarian, is that something that the teacher would then be required to report back because that's something that's impacting their physical health? So just in general, it creates an incredibly slippery slope. And it's, it's not the same level of, doctor-patient confidentiality, but there is something, I think any of us that have gone through a school system, we understand what it was like to have a teacher, if you connected with that created a safe space for you to be able to share some part of yourself that you were exploring and just wanted to learn more about in a way that was safe. So I think that, it's one of those things that I think any of those decisions to my understanding, could trigger the bill's protection. And then again, now Florida would then be open to, or that particular school system would be open to a lawsuit from the parent. So
do you think that the schools need to be equipped with a counselor of some sort, someone that is on staff for these schools to have these conversations? And, you know, because the other part of the bill is the fact of, and you said it, that the level of mental health that's attached to it, emotional and mental health that's attached to it, especially if a child feels like they might be, you know, inclined one way or another. Do you think that now schools should really look at getting paid professionals to be on their staff to help that school to be in a better place in building those relationships without ostracizing students and parents?
Absolutely. And I think that we're as adults, and I think for anyone that has young people that just kind of consider what matriculating through 2 years of school in a pandemic was like, we understand a little bit more personally now the developmental impact of not being in social spaces, right? We're social creatures. We need to interact with each other. So to not be able to have those conversations in constructive and safe spaces, to me, I think is not only is it's unfair, I think it just it creates ill-prepared students for a very diverse world. That's what my opinion is. So I think that in order to equip our students, yes, I think that we have to have adults that are equipped to have those conversations, to facilitate those conversations. And my hope would be that they're able to facilitate conversations in groups and in social settings, as opposed to this one student then being further isolated, having to go to the counselor's office to have that one-on-one conversation as if they are not part of a larger community, right? Which just, again, creates more isolation. And that's what, in a lot of research about LGBTQ youth, we know that isolation, we know the impacts of isolation and how that impacts your mental health. And that's for all of us just as human beings, right? So it's not just about your sexual orientation. That's when any of us are isolated for extended periods of time, it has a negative impact on our mental health.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, Bakari, to see. I know that some people say, well, when Florida goes one way, so does the rest of the country. But I've heard the same thing about Texas, and I've heard the same thing about California, right? But it's going to be interesting to see, because I feel like there may be some variations of this bill that may come up. It may not be as strict or as stringent as this Florida bill is, but I think there's going to be some discussion across the country in saying, okay, how do we have these conversations? Okay, it's fine. We don't have to, include kindergartners to third grade. But what about sixth graders through eighth? What about high school students? Right? Like, how do you have these conversations as children are growing up in same-sex households? They're growing up dealing with their own sexuality, growing up in a way like you just can't. And I know you and I've talked about this tremendously, but I know that within the Black community, especially, there's this sense as if, being gay or being a lesbian or being a part of the trans community is just going to magically disappear.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, people act like, well, if I don't pay attention to it, it will just go away. And I'm like, nah, bro, it don't work like that. Like, this is actual human beings, people with feelings, people who believe that, that they are their authentic selves. It don't work that way. You're going to have to make a space for this community.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fear-based though, right? And it's like, once again, Governor DeSantis saying that, this becoming trendy, it for me is wild, and it's kind of alarming, because we're still not having the conversation. We're still not addressing the elephant in the room. I can totally understand, this bill specifically protecting the youngest folks among us, but I think to pretend that young people as young as 3 don't start asking, are you a girl or a boy, to folks that are non-binary or trans, I think that what's the point of pretending that that's not already happening? So now we're just producing, you know, we use a term in a lot of different ways, but we're producing youth who are just ignorant, right? And again, just not equipped in the ways that they could be to operate and to advance in a very diverse world and culture.
Or at least not even doing the due diligence of making sure that we acknowledge to children that you have all different types of people around you.
Right. Without promoting
one way,
just
right?
Exactly.
Just saying, look, you got different types of people, and if they respect you, then you should respect them. You know what I mean? Just real basic, real simple. They are human beings. They want rights. Because that's the same way that we can be seen, and I know we're not going to conflate the struggle of Black and
we know we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that. But at a certain point in American history, white people had to have these conversations with their children and say, "You may be going to school with Black people." Now, I know that our network is not full of Black people, but there are some. I'm sure some white people said, "Hey, when you get to school, you treat them the way they treat you."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just a thing about human dignity and respect and making a space for people that don't have a space for themselves, that you allow people to speak their truth who traditionally are voiceless. And I think that's the best way to take it. Bakari, I always appreciate you, sis. Thank you so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate it, and all the great works that you continue to do. Thank you, Bakari.
Thank you, Farajii.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, the last word for the week. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, as we get to the end of the week, the last word for me would be Black. All this week, we've had conversations about, whether we should use the term Black, whether we should see ourselves as Black. As much as we talked about that part of the conversation, there was also another part where we talked about Black women. We talked about the struggles of Black women. We've seen this case with Jussie Smollett, with Black people in the legal system. We've been inundated, and we seem to be under attack from all directions. And then at this point, we have to just find ourselves. Whatever you call yourself by, you cannot remove yourself from the struggle that your people are a part of, that I'm a part of. And so the reason I chose the word Black is because it's often been debated. It's often been seen as Smokey Robinson said, negativized, but it also has a negative connotation. And I'm saying to us is that we don't have to have a negative connotation to it. We can just take the stigma out. We can take the sting out of this. It's not about color. It's about your thinking. It's about our culture. It's about our attitude toward one another. That being Black in America is so much more than just entertainment, just sports. Our culture has to really encapsulate who we are. And being Black in this country requires us to dig deep. It requires us to think progressively. It requires us to have a vision about ourselves that no one else can have. Being Black in this country requires us to bear the brunt, to bear all the pain. But we know that. And guess what? We were made to handle that. We have gone through so many trials and so many tribulations as a result of our Blackness. We have gone up, as I was taught, the rough side that the mountain can provide as a result of our Blackness. But yet, look at us. We are still here. We are still thriving, not just striving. We are still making progress, not just struggling. We are in a space and we have the opportunity now to do something that our parents and foreparents, grandparents and foreparents hadn't had an opportunity to do, which is to take our Blackness and to fuel it and to use it as fuel to power us to make great gains. You know, I go back to thinking and reflecting on what President Biden didn't say, the missed opportunities of that moment of the State of the Union. And I go back thinking over the past year, the missed opportunities politically for us. But then I thought to myself, it is not to anyone other than us for us to change our reality in this country. It's not up to President Biden. It's not up to Congress. It's up to us. And it's up to us to see that our Blackness is not a badge of shame. It is a badge of honor. It shows that we can withstand. It shows that we can go through and persevere in a way that no other people have gone through and persevered before. So when we go through the cities and go through the towns, when we go through any space, I want you to hold your head up high. I want you to think to yourself and say, you know what? I'm Black. If you want to call yourself African American, so be it. But don't let your head get low because of all of the challenges that we may be facing in this country. We don't have time for that. We have generations that are waiting for us to be the generation that they prayed for. I'm going to say that one more time. We have generations waiting for us to be the generation that they prayed for. That we are going to disrupt the systems of white supremacy and the powers of iniquity and disrupt inferiority, that we're going to become Black people that are no longer being subservient, but Black people that are masters of their fate and their destiny. So all of this that we have covered this week in relating to Black people, take it with a grain of salt, get your fuel from it, become empowered by it, and most importantly, say to yourself, I'm Black and I'm proud. And I want you to not just say it loud, but I want you to say it within your own recesses of your heart and your mind and your spirit. Because there's nothing to be ashamed about to be who you are. You should only be ashamed when you don't know yourself. That's my last word today, folks. I thank you so much for tuning in. I thank all the wonderful guests that we've had over this past few days. Man, it's been an amazing week. We've had a lot of great conversations. Just know we got some more great conversations planned for you on for next week. So make sure y'all tune in. Also, make sure you let your family and friends know we are still building the culture. We're still building Culture Crew. All of you that have been tuning in on Facebook and on YouTube, we're still building our fan base, and we want to continue to build. The momentum is growing. The momentum is there, but we can only make it the way we want to make it with your support. So that's why we ask you to share all of our videos, share everything that you say. Hit me up and say, Farajii, what about this? What about that? But if there's something that was said during the course of this week that really resonated with your mind, your heart, and your spirit, just know that you can have the full liberty. You have the power to let people know about what we're doing here on The Culture. And of course, as we are a representative of the great network, the Black Star Network, we want you to take full ownership of this network. That's why we invite you to support us each and every day. You can go to blackstarnetwork.com and you can make your donation. You can support Black Star Network. You can support Black-owned media like never before. And it's important that you do what you can do. We're not asking each person to put up $100. You could put up $10 because guess what? It's not about the amount of money. It's about where it comes from for us. So yes, we love to get all of the money, but just your viewing eyes, just your shares helps us to make this a very, very special place to get your news, your information, and to get all things cultural right here on the Black Star Network. Man, oh man, what a fantastic and dynamic week. Stay tuned. Up next at the 6 o'clock hour is my big brother, Roland Martin, for Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, family, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll reconnect on Monday. See each other again for another exciting edition of The Culture right here, only exclusively on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Peace.